So welcome. So Teresa and I have several pages of a compilation, excuse me, of the questions that were submitted to Sharon when she asked for them several weeks ago. So I think what we're going to do is I'm going to read a question for Teresa and she'll respond, and then she's going to read a question for me and I'll try to respond, and we'll go back and forth and see how far we get.
Yeah.
So Teresa, the first question is, how do I begin and sustain a daily meditation practice?
Anybody? Is that live for anybody here? How do I begin and sustain? It's almost two questions, isn't it? Begin and sustained. We could give the response that Nike gives, just do it. Just do it. So we all know what the basics are, and generally I think that most of us have greater difficulty getting started than sustaining something. And it may be helpful if you can draw an analogy to the last thing you learned how to do well, whether it was speaking a different language, learning how to cook, learning how to play tennis. What'd you learn what's the last thing you learned how to do well? And how long did it take you to become relatively proficient at that? So what we're talking about here is training this organism, if you will, to be different, to develop some new habits. And the way in which we do that, of course, is we do it. We set a time that we practice. We have some diligence about self-practice, first of all, but it's also been said that this is a very difficult thing to maintain solo, on your own. Yeah, I see some heads nodding around the room. So it's really important for you to figure out what it is you need in order to support your practice. For some, it's coming here on Tuesday nights, at least on occasion, to sort of get that boost. For others of you, it may be attending a course or a class, doing the 6-week intro class through IMCC. There are other courses around town that you could avail yourselves of. If you've got a practice going, but it's kind of going along in fits and starts, and you want to sort of jump-start it, the best way to do that is to come to a day-long or go on retreat for a weekend or a week-long. So there's one coming up. Susan announced it tonight. So come to that day-long in another 6 weeks or so as a way to jump-start your practice. There is so much more we could say about this topic, but we'll be stuck on the first question all night. So, second question. How am I supposed to sit? Why is it customary to sit cross-legged? Is that better than other poses?
There's no correct way. I mean, what we say is make sure that your posture is alert and upright, but not tense and not stiff. The idea being that you don't want to slump or get sleepy or fall asleep, ideally. The whole cross-legged thing is a tradition that really goes back for millennia. And if you think about it, in the time of the Buddha, he and his monastics are wandering around northern India. There are not a lot of chairs, not a lot of places to sit down. So they developed this way of sitting where they could do it anywhere in a deer park, which is one of the places they often ended up, on the ground comfortably and do this practice. And that involves sitting in the so-called lotus or half lotus position with the one leg up. And that tradition has continued because it does allow for oneself to be upright and alert. But it's not the only way. A chair is fine, a bench is fine, whatever works for you. The bottom line is to be comfortable so that you can sit for a relatively long time, whatever that is for you, and that you are upright and alert and don't tend to fall asleep. How do I set up an altar? And why don't you do both of these? What is the best time of day to meditate?
Okay, so setting up an altar, generally people might choose something to be in that place where you are deciding that you're going to sit on a regular basis, where you're going to practice. And the altar can be, for some it's a table, a simple table, could be a windowsill, could be something really basic, where you place something that allows you to remember why you're practicing, or something that's important to you. If you've sat on retreats, you know that at some retreats, at times there are not only images of the Buddha or Kuan Yin perhaps at the front of the room, but there may also be personal additions to that altar, such as photographs of beloved ones. It could be something from nature that's a reminder to you of this practice. So many possibilities there. What's the best time of day to meditate? Again, a very highly personal question. If you've been coming here for a while, you're aware that what we often emphasize is this practice is really one that you make your own. So you are trying different ways to sit. You know, Jeff mentioned different postures to sit in. We can also meditate walking or lying down as well. So you're looking at what is optimal for you. Many people consider first thing in the morning to be the best time. And why is that? Because, well, for some really busy people, it's the only time you can carve out a little slice of the day before work, before the kids get up, before the dog gets up, maybe not, or the cat gets up. But it's that time where you could set the alarm for 15 minutes earlier or whatever, to have that space for yourself that enables you to start the day with this moment of practice, of calm, of some centeredness. Yeah. But if you're not a morning person, then maybe you would prefer to meditate in the evening. And I think it's Sharon Salzberg who writes that she never goes to bed at night without having a very, even if it's very brief, a 5-minute practice, just as a way to calm, to go to sleep without the frenzy or the whirlpool of ideas that are often streaming through us as a result of our busy days. How long should I meditate each day? And similar question, what's the optimal duration per day to sit?
You know, again, it was coming off what Teresa said, it's an individual preference. But what we know is that the longer you can set aside to meditate, it's more likely that your practice will become deeper. That being said, if you can only meditate for 5 minutes, that's a start. I mean, often students will say, well, I can't find a block of time. And the response is often, well, can you find 5 minutes? Can you find 5 minutes a couple times a day? So work with that. Try not to make the sit a chore, another thing on your to-do list. Think of it as a gift to yourself. Think of it as your special time to just get quiet, to treat yourself to that. And see if that doesn't make it easier to carve out a chunk of time. And often you have to get a buy-in from your family, your spouse, your mate, your kids, your pets, whatever. But, get them to understand the importance of this in your life and then try to carve out that time. But certainly make it a gift to yourself and then choose the time accordingly. I think one thing that happens is as we go along with our practice, we tend to sit for longer periods of time. You come off a retreat where you've been sitting a lot during the day, each day, and you want to sustain a deeper practice. It's very often, those are the times when you'll extend the amount of time you meditate. Mm-hmm. What are good foods to eat or avoid eating to support meditation? Is it better to exercise before or after meditating?
So I'm not sure I've ever seen anything in print with regard to diet and meditation, but what we do know is that since this is a practice about discovering ultimately what is wise view, what is wise action, then anything that supports your well-being will be applicable here. In other words, there's not a separation here. Now, having said that, ice cream, chocolate, those wonderful things. The other thing that we know about the practice of meditation, and this has a little bit to do with the next question around exercise as well, is that it is easier and more profitable to meditate on a relatively empty stomach. And that's because the energy can be devoted to your practice, not to the digestion of food. So you might just experiment with that when you come here on a Tuesday night. See what it's like to eat a light meal at 5 or 5:30 and then come here and sit at 7:30 versus eating a big dinner at 6:30 before coming. So play with this, see how your body is, and just in general to practice on a relatively empty stomach. And the question about is it better to exercise before or after meditating, again, that's something I think you would discover with a little bit of exploration, investigation. Some people say that if on a particular day you feel a little wound up, restless, agitated, that it can be very helpful to either stretch the body, do some yoga or whatever your mindfulness body practice is, whether it's Tai Chi or yoga or Qigong. Do that prior to your sitting practice as a way to just get the kinks out, let the body relax a little bit. The other thing you could do if the body is a bit wound up is to do a walking meditation. So, a couple of options there. Yeah. Next question. As I start to relax, I have itches that pop up that I just have to scratch. It's distracting and annoying. I'm wondering if it's my nervous system quieting down. So.
I think as we start to get quiet, we may notice more sensations. One of the things we talk about is paying attention to sensations in the body. So very often bodily sensations will come up as one of the things that draws our attention during meditation. And ideally we would just sort of watch those arise and pass away like all phenomena. But if it's very compelling, very uncomfortable, we say this as well about the posture. Don't just try to tough it out and grit your teeth and put your head down. It's not illegal to scratch an itch. There's no one's going to police that. So, we don't want you getting into sort of a should about it. Just go ahead and investigate it. It's fine to just see where it's coming up in the body. What might that, what sensations or thoughts might accompany that. But again, if it's very challenging and uncomfortable, go ahead and scratch the itch.